Hey guys, tonight we're opening a can of historical worms, possibly laced with something a little extra, because we're drifting off to the fizz, the fury, and the absolutely bonkers reality of soda in the 1900s. That's right. Tonight's sleep story is why every soda in the 1900s used to contain drugs. If you've ever wondered why your grandparents' favorite refreshing beverage used to give people more energy than a toddler at a birthday party, buckle up. We're about to wander through an era when soda was sold at the pharmacy. Your local doctor might prescribe you a Coca-Cola for a headache, and the average lunch counter had more controlled substances than a modern EDM festival. Tonight, we'll dive into a time when Pepsi was a digestive tonic, Coca-Cola was basically liquid inspiration, and the words energy drink meant something completely different. Before we crack open this fizzy time capsule, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this kind of historical insomnia fuel. Drop a comment telling me which modern soda you'd trust to heal your ills, or which one you think is just secretly cough syrup in disguise. I want to know. Especially if you're listening at 2 a.m., staring at your ceiling, contemplating whether Sprite could fix your existential dread. Now, dim those lights, switch on a fan for that low-level humming sound, and get comfortable. Maybe even pour yourself a nice, safe, 100% drug-free beverage. Unless you're feeling brave and have a vintage bottle of nerve tonic somewhere in your attic. Let's get those questions percolating. Why was the pharmacy the best place to get your caffeine hit and a free side of cocaine? Did people really use soda to treat headaches, constipation, or just crippling boredom? What exactly did nerve tonic even mean? And was it ever a good idea to let your kids have a glass? Would you actually survive a night out with the original Dr. Pepper? Or would your heart file for bankruptcy? How did we go from soda fountains as centers of community health to, well, the place you mix Sprite and Fanta together for science? And most importantly, would you trust a drink called Vin Mariani or Celery Cola to solve all your problems, or would you stick to something with less of a reputation for accidental euphoria? Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1901. You're standing at the marble counter of a bustling American soda fountain. The air smells like sugar, citrus, and faintly of medicinal root extracts. You have a splitting headache, a mysterious stomachache, and a sudden urge to try whatever is bubbling behind the counter. Welcome to the golden age of soda and side effects. Step up to the marble counter and take a seat. Welcome to the soda fountain, the 1900s answer to both the local coffee shop and your family doctor's waiting room. This is where teenagers flirted, businessmen schemed, and everyone from your grandma to your toddler came for a medicinal pick-me-up with a sweet finish. The soda fountain wasn't just a place, it was an event, a daily ritual, and, for some, the closest thing you'd get to therapy before the invention of daytime television. Picture the air thick with the smell of sweet syrups, seltzer mist, and whatever vaguely medicinal scent was leaking out from behind the counter. You, in your best hat and slightly uncomfortable shoes, slide onto a stool that's only a little bit sticky and brace yourself for the show. Behind the counter, the soda jerk, part pharmacist, part barista, part small-town gossip, wields his long-handled pumps with the confidence of a man who knows he holds the keys to your digestion, your nerves, and, sometimes, your dignity. He's there to serve up a cherry phosphate for heartbreak, a bromo for hangovers, or just a plain cola to help you survive the afternoon lull. And if you look like you're having a particularly rough day, he might slip in a little something extra, back when extra might mean caffeine, cocaine, or a dash of mysterious nerve tonic. This was not just a pit stop for sugar, it was the original social network. You'd find the local doctor prescribing a medicinal glass of sarsaparilla to a sniffling toddler. while 2 tables over, a group of widows nursed their ailments and their curiosity by peering over the tops of their glasses at everyone who walked in. Teenagers, meanwhile, gathered in packs, swapping schoolyard rumors and marshmallow cokes with equal parts enthusiasm and acne. But the soda fountain was also America's original wellness center, long before wellness influencers started blending kale and regret. In the early 1900s, the line between medicine and refreshment was blurrier than a hangover at sunrise. The marble counter was lined with glass jars and apothecary bottles promising cures for every ailment imaginable. Stomachache? Have a celery tonic. Headache? A dash of Coca-Cola, loaded with the kind of ingredients that would land you on a watch list today. Trouble sleeping? Well, maybe don't ask for the nerve drops, unless you really want a nap. Everyone had a favorite. Little kids got egg creams and chocolate sodas, which, despite the name, contained no egg but plenty of chocolate, seltzer, and parental optimism. Businessmen preferred phosphates and braces, drinks loaded with caffeine, and just enough mystery to keep you coming back for more. And for the local hypochondriacs, there was always the promise of the next big elixir. Something to steady the nerves, settle the stomach, and, if you read the small print, possibly cause mild hallucinations. The soda fountain was also a stage for the bizarre. Salesmen would roll in with new miracle syrups, and the soda jerk would try out the latest root and bark infusion on the unsuspecting crowd. Sometimes, there were spontaneous debates. Is sarsaparilla better than root? Beer? Does celery soda count as a vegetable? And, crucially, is it safe to order anything the pharmacist can't pronounce? But most of all, the soda fountain was the great equalizer. Everyone, from the banker in his stiff collar to the farmhand covered in dust, could gather at the same counter. You might rub elbows with your boss or the mayor's wife or the kid who delivers your morning paper. In a world divided by class, gender, and endless rules about propriety, the soda fountain was a rare place where you could park your worries, your coat, and your expectations at the door. It wasn't perfect. Nothing in history ever is. But for a brief, bubbly moment in the 1900s, the soda fountain was the closest America ever got to true democracy. Served over ice with a twist of lemon, and maybe, just maybe, a side of mild euphoria. Before soda was a treat, it was a treatment. Imagine inventing carbonated water and thinking, what if we add something that will absolutely not get us in trouble with the FDA? Because the FDA does not exist yet. This was the era when your average inventor looked at a glass of plain water and thought, you know what would fix this? Bubbles. And thus fizzy water was born. Not out of thirst, but out of a centuries-long belief that if your drink tickled your nose, it could probably cure what ailed you. Doctors and chemists of the late 18th and 19th centuries were obsessed with the idea that carbonated water wasn't just refreshing, it was practically a miracle cure. Did you have indigestion, melancholy, or a vague existential dread from reading too many gloomy Victorian novels? Don't worry, just have a glass of mineral water, artificially improved with bubbles. Naturally, once people started bubbling their water, the next step was to dump in whatever else they had lying around the apothecary. Bit of quinine? Sure, it's for malaria, but maybe it'll also make you less irritable at dinner parties. Drop in some sarsaparilla root, some bark, a little lemon peel, and why not a pinch of cocaine? It was the Wild West of medicine, and no one had invented the concept of side effects yet. In the absence of regulation, everyone became an amateur chemist. Pharmacists, then known as druggists because truth in advertising hadn't caught on, were pioneers in the art of beverage-based medicine. You'd walk into a pharmacy complaining of headaches, fatigue, or the vague malaise that comes from living in a time without Netflix, and the druggist would slide you a glass of something fortifying. You didn't ask what was in it. You just prayed it didn't glow in the dark. Let's pause to appreciate just how optimistic or reckless these inventors were. People truly believed that carbonated water could treat everything from the common cold to spiritual ennui. The thinking went like this: natural mineral springs made you feel good. So why not bottle that experience? If you couldn't afford a trip to a fancy European spa, you could still get the effect at home or at the local drugstore, minus the sulfur smell and with bonus psychoactive properties. The recipes were as eclectic as the illnesses. Dr. Joseph Priestley, the man who first figured out how to infuse water with carbon dioxide, described it as peculiarly refreshing, which, in 18th century scientists speak, means this will either wake you up or dissolve your teeth. From there, it was only a short leap to the soda fountain, where every bottle and glass became a game of medicinal roulette. Of course, there was science involved, sort of. The logic was that the body needed stimulation of the organs, the nerves, and, apparently, the imagination. That's why so many original sodas had labels like liver tonic or blood purifier, promising not just hydration but a full-body tune-up. Ever wondered why so many early sodas referenced the nerves? Because life was stressful, medicine was weird, and nobody had invented yoga yet. The lack of oversight led to some of the most delightfully absurd remedies in history. Got a cough? Here, drink this cherry-flavored syrup with codeine. Then chase it with a bubbly lemon phosphate. Kid can't focus in school? Pour them a glass of celery soda loaded with caffeine and send them outside to mow the neighbor's lawn at record speed. In the early days, being healthy was less about diet and exercise and more about finding the right combination of fizz and pharmacology. Looking back, it's amazing anyone made it out of the 19th century with their internal organs intact. But the fizzy medicine era wasn't just dangerous. It was genuinely hopeful, driven by the kind of enthusiasm only possible before anyone had heard the word regulation. Soda, as it turns out, is the story of humanity's ongoing quest for easy answers, sweet distractions, and, above all, drinks that are more exciting than water. So next time you crack open a can of Diet Cola, just remember, you're sipping on the legacy of inventors who thought bubbles could heal you, pharmacists who mixed with wild abandon, and a public who believed the cure for life's troubles might be just a fizz away. And honestly, in their defense, it sometimes worked, if only because everyone was too busy giggling to remember what was wrong in the first place. You wander in with a headache. The druggist hands you a dark, sweet drink, Coca-Cola, proudly containing actual cocaine and caffeine, the dynamic duo of legal energy and questionable life choices. It's the 1900s, and you're not at a soda fountain, you're at a dispensary of optimism, hope, and just a sprinkle of mild euphoria. The world is loud and grimy, your shoes are uncomfortable, and you're not entirely sure if your stomach is upset or just suffering from too much late-night ham. But as you sip that mysterious concoction, you feel a wave of pleasant tingling and clarity. Suddenly, life's little annoyances, your boss's bad breath, the fact that you've never owned socks without holes, seem entirely manageable. You're ready to seize the day, alphabetize your spice rack, and write your memoir, possibly all at once. But what exactly are you drinking? In this era, Coca-Cola isn't just a beverage, it's an elixir, a remedy, a glass of don't ask too many questions. Invented by John Pemberton, a wounded Civil War veteran with a passion for painkillers, the original recipe was designed as a patent medicine. Coca-Cola's earliest advertisements swore it could treat headaches, relieve exhaustion, and soothe nervous afflictions, which, coincidentally, covered pretty much everyone living through the invention of electricity, the steam engine, and the world's first traffic jams. The magic ingredient? About 9 milligrams of cocaine per serving. That's right. The secret formula included coca leaf extract, a little caffeine from the cola nut, and a generous helping of sugar, enough to wake up your brain, numb your worries, and encourage you to order another round. To be fair, nobody back then really understood what cocaine did, except that it made people alarmingly cheerful and, for a brief golden window, far more productive than any morning coffee ever could. The effect was instant. Headaches faded, aches vanished, and customers returned with suspicious frequency. Businessmen drank it for pep, housewives sipped it for calm nerves. Writers swore it unlocked new worlds of creativity, while musicians claimed it helped with the blues, though after 3 glasses, everyone played a little too fast. You weren't just refreshed. You were renewed, inspired, and maybe just a little bit immortal. It's like your brain threw itself a surprise party and forgot to invite moderation. There was, of course, a catch. With every fizzy, invigorating glass, you were slowly joining the world's most polite caffeine and cocaine club. No secret handshake required, just a willingness to accept that your mid-morning pick-me-up might be the reason you couldn't sleep for a week, and nobody thought this was odd. The only people raising their eyebrows were the ones trying to patent their own rival drinks, most of which contained even stranger ingredients. Looking at you, celery cola. What's wild is that Coca-Cola's popularity didn't just come from the special ingredients. The drink itself was delicious. A blend of citrus, vanilla, cinnamon, and caramel, with a nose-tickling fizz that made every sip feel luxurious. The company leaned into this, marketing their soda as both a sophisticated refreshment and a scientific breakthrough. Early ads featured elegant women and robust mustachioed men, all promising that this bottle held the solution to every minor woe. By the time anyone started to question the wisdom of chugging cocaine with your lunch, Coca-Cola was everywhere. Soda fountains made it the social drink of choice. School teachers drank it for energy. Politicians guzzled it to stay alert in endless meetings. Even kids could sidle up to the counter and order a glass, no questions asked, as long as they had a nickel and enough charm to wink at the soda jerk. Eventually, science caught up with marketing. By the 1910s, public pressure and changing laws forced the company to quietly remove the cocaine, though, for decades, the recipe still included decocainized coca leaf, just to keep the flavor and the legend alive. But the real secret of Coca-Cola wasn't just the ingredients, it was the story, the ritual, the feeling that, for a few glorious minutes, you could drink your way out of any problem. So next time you reach for a can, remember, you're sipping on a legacy built by dreamers, chemists, and people who honestly believed that a daily dose of caffeine and cocaine was the best idea since sliced bread. And in their defense, for a little while, it absolutely was. If you've ever felt bloated after a heavy meal, imagine living in a time when Pepsi was marketed as the answer to your gurgling stomach, not your thirst for sugar water at the movies. This is the dawn of the stomach tonic. A magical time in American history when eating a second helping of ham and potatoes wasn't a dietary mistake. It was an opportunity for science. You push away from the dinner table, clutching your midsection and wondering if maybe you shouldn't have gone back for thirds. Enter Pepsi, Not in a shiny red and blue can, but in a thick glass bottle with a label that promises to restore your internal peace. The original name? Brad's Drink, invented in 1893 by a North Carolina pharmacist named Caleb Bradham, who believed the world needed a solution for indigestion that was just a little more fun than peppermint tea and way tastier than chewing on charcoal. Bradham's logic was simple. If people already trusted their pharmacist with leeches and mysterious ointments, why not trust him with a fizzy new elixir? He mixed together sugar, water, caramel, nutmeg, and a blend of natural oils that sounded suspiciously like a recipe for fruitcake. The secret ingredient, though, was pepsin, an enzyme extracted from pig stomachs, which he claimed would help break down whatever was currently trying to wrestle its way through yours. Add a little cola nut for a caffeine kick, and you've got a medicinal masterpiece. Brad's Drink, soon to be rebranded as Pepsi Cola. Because what says digestive harmony like a dash of branding? The result? A lightly spiced, bubbly concoction that made people feel better, or at least distracted them from their intestinal drama. Early Pepsi wasn't just a beverage, it was a lifestyle. It was advertised as the original pure food drink, a bold claim in an era when most pure foods contained at least one heavy metal and a sprinkle of wishful thinking. By the early 1900s, Pepsi's advertising leaned hard into the promise of relief. Pepsi, Cola aids digestion. The message was clear. If your gut was unhappy, your options were limited. You could groan on the porch, try your luck with a patent medicine that tasted like motor oil, or reach for a cool, crisp bottle of Pepsi and let the bubbles do the work. Drinking Pepsi for your stomach was a communal event. Families would gather after Sunday dinner and pour glasses for everyone, kids included. There was a whiff of ritual to the whole thing, the pop of the cap, the fizz rising up, the first cold sip. People swore by its effectiveness. Your uncle might claim it helped him recover from cornbread overload. Your grandma would insist it soothed her nerves after Uncle Earl's jokes. Was it the pepsin, the caffeine, or just the placebo effect with extra carbonation? Nobody knew and nobody cared. Of course, as with most miracle cures of the era, there was a certain creative license at play. Modern science later pointed out that there probably wasn't much pepsin in a bottle of Pepsi Cola. And if there was, it certainly wasn't doing much for your digestion. But who needs facts when you have the power of suggestion, slick marketing, and the collective memory of that time everyone got through Thanksgiving dinner without needing to lie down for a week? What's more, Pepsi wasn't alone in the stomach-soothing soda sweepstakes. Rival companies rushed to market their own versions of digestive colas, loaded with ingredients that sound more like a chemistry set than a snack. Bromo seltzer, celery cola, and a parade of phosphate tonics all promised to fix whatever was ailing you, whether it was a case of nervous exhaustion or just too much gravy. Still, Pepsi stood out, not just for its medicinal claims, but for its taste. It was sweet but not overwhelming, spiced but not weird, and caffeinated just enough to keep you awake through your post-supper existential crisis. Eventually, as regulations tightened and science marched on, the pepsin quietly disappeared, and Pepsi shifted from a health drink to a treat for the masses. The promise of digestive health faded, but the ritual remained. Crack open a bottle, share it with friends, and pretend for just a moment that your stomach is invincible. So next time you sip a Pepsi at the movies, raise a toast to the days when the most advanced gut remedy was something you could buy at the pharmacy. Carbonated, caffeinated, and, above all, deliciously optimistic. Because history proves that sometimes feeling better is just a matter of good branding and a little bit of fizz. Dr. Pepper wasn't just mysterious because of its flavor profile. Early formulations had a little something for everyone, except, perhaps, anyone looking for a good night's sleep. You take a sip, and your taste buds go on a vision quest. Is that cherry, vanilla, a hint of prune? Possibly a whisper of clove and a distant memory of molasses? Nobody really knows, including, perhaps, the people who made it. What we do know is that Dr. Pepper hit the scene in the 1880s, marketed as a brain tonic and invigorator, which in 19th century terms meant a legal way to temporarily feel like a genius on roller skates. Created by a pharmacist named Charles Alderton in Waco, Texas. Dr. Pepper was originally served at Morrison's Old Corner drugstore, a classic Southern establishment where a drink wasn't just a refreshment, it was a lifestyle. Alderton, like many pharmacists of his time, wasn't content just handing out chalky pills and foot ointments. No, he wanted to invent a new kind of beverage, one that didn't taste like medicine, but also, just maybe, was medicine. Because in the 80s, all you really needed was a marble counter, some carbonated water, and a dream. And so, Dr. Pepper was born. A mysterious blend of 23 flavors, each one carefully chosen, allegedly, to stimulate different parts of the brain and body. No one knows exactly what all 23 are, and the company guards the recipe like it's the nuclear codes. But what they didn't hide back then was its stimulant punch. Caffeine, for starters, was a major ingredient. It gave the drink an edge, a pick-me-up that could jolt you out of a food coma or a mid-morning nap without making you jittery enough to question your life choices. But that wasn't all. In the early days, there were rumors of cola nuts, spices, fruit extracts, and other natural energizers that sound suspiciously like ingredients you'd find in a scented candle or a magician's pantry. While there's no verified evidence that Dr. Pepper ever contained cocaine like Coca-Cola did, that didn't stop people from whispering, and in a time before ingredient labels, whispering was basically Yelp. Dr. Pepper was sold as a cure for everything from low energy to the vague 19th century diagnosis of liver sluggishness. That's right, if your liver was underperforming, a bottle of fizzy, spiced brown liquid was apparently the solution. And the public agreed. By the turn of the century, Dr. Pepper was a hit across the American South, earning a loyal fan base of students, farmers, and anyone else whose nerves were frayed by a lack of central air conditioning. Even the marketing leaned into its invigorating charm. Early slogans included King of Beverages and Drink a Bite to Eat at 10, 2, and 4, implying that Dr. Pepper was not just a drink, it was sustenance. Breakfast? Dr. Pepper. Lunch? Dr. Pepper. Dinner? You guessed it. Why chew when you could sip your way to fullness and minor cardiac acceleration? As with many other sodas of the time, the line between refreshment and medication was very, very blurry. People genuinely believed that Dr. Pepper could boost your mood, focus your mind, and keep your spirits high, even if your diet consisted mostly of canned meat and prayer. And, in a way, it worked. The bubbles lifted your spirits. The caffeine slapped your eyelids open, and the sweet, spiced blend distracted you just long enough to forget that you still hadn't finished painting the barn. Today, Dr. Pepper sits on shelves as one of the quirkiest icons of American soda history. It doesn't have the same health claims anymore. No one's calling it brain fuel these days, but the legacy is still there. Every can is a time capsule from a period when flavor complexity meant mysterious herbal jolt, and stimulant-based optimism was just good business. So the next time you crack open a cold Dr. Pepper, remember, you're sipping a drink engineered to wake you up, cheer you up, and possibly trick your 1902 brain into thinking you were smarter than you really were. And honestly, that's still a pretty solid sales pitch. Ever wanted a drink that combines the fun of alcohol with the invincibility of cocaine? In the 1900s, Vin Mariani was served up as a health elixir, promising everything except perhaps sound judgment. Imagine it. You're a tired 19th century Parisian artist. Your hands are stained with ink, your rent is overdue, and your latest poem about despair isn't impressing your patron. What do? You reach for a glass of Vin Mariani, a tonic so powerful, so utterly audacious, that it turned entire generations into inspired, wide-eyed, mildly vibrating optimists. It was wine, but with a twist. That twist being cocaine. Not metaphorical cocaine, actual, Peruvian, finely imported coca extract, created by French chemist Angelo Mariani in the 1860s. This drink didn't just promise to make you feel better. It promised to make you better, smarter, faster, stronger, like a Victorian energy drink with none of the pesky warnings. The formula was deceptively simple. Fine Bordeaux wine infused with coca leaves, the very same plant used to make cocaine. The alcohol extracted the active ingredients, and what you were left with was a legal, socially accepted, and extremely effective pick-me-up. And people loved it. I mean really, truly, obsessively loved it. Popes drank it. Authors raved about it. Scientists endorsed it. Queen Victoria probably sipped it while politely pretending she didn't notice the carpet was moving. Everyone from the tired, overworked peasants to the exhausted elite bought into the dream that in a single glass you could feel alive again. Vin Mariani was marketed as a tonic wine designed to restore vitality, cure fatigue, and give you the nerve to sit through another 4-hour opera without slumping over. The ads weren't subtle. They featured glowing testimonials from celebrities of the day: Jules Verne, Thomas Edison, Ulysses S. Grant, swearing that this magical elixir had helped them create their masterpieces, think their great thoughts, or at the very least, not fall asleep in meetings. And yes, even Pope Leo XIII, head of the Catholic Church and presumably someone with access to divine caffeine, endorsed it. He even gave Angelo Mariani a Vatican medal, which is the 19th century equivalent of getting verified on Instagram. You know you've made it when your energy drink is blessed by the Pope. Of course, no one was talking about side effects, like the part where your bloodstream was now a glittering highway of both alcohol and stimulants, or the fact that people were drinking this before breakfast and wondering why their heartbeat sounded like a jazz solo. But hey, it was the 1800s. Regulation hadn't even been invented yet. If your medicine didn't make your ears ring slightly, were you even trying? Vin Mariani became a cultural phenomenon not just because it worked, but because it fit the mood of the time. This was an era of progress, of railways, telegraphs, and increasingly absurd hats. People wanted to feel superhuman, and Vin Mariani handed them that feeling in a glass. It was the drink of dreamers, inventors, and anyone trying to outrun their own exhaustion. In the US, Vin Mariani inspired countless knockoffs. One of them, in fact, would go on to become a little brand you might have heard of: Coca-Cola. That's right, Coca-Cola started as America's answer to Vin Mariani, minus the wine but still with a heaping dose of coca. Because why sleep when you could sparkle with internal lightning? Eventually, the world sobered up, both literally and legally. Cocaine fell out of favor as side effects became harder to ignore, and governments began nervously scribbling the word regulation in large red letters. Vin Mariani quietly disappeared from shelves, replaced by safer, milder drinks with fewer endorsements from religious leaders. Still, the legacy remains. Vin Mariani wasn't just a beverage, it was a belief system in a bottle. A fizzy, boozy, slightly terrifying belief that you could push through anything if your wine was spiked just right. And, in a way, they were right. You could do anything as long as you didn't mind vibrating gently for the next 6 hours. So next time your afternoon slump hits, just remember, you could be drinking wine mixed with cocaine and calling it medicine. And honestly, depending on your inbox, you might be a little tempted. Feeling anxious? Try this delicious nerve tonic, says the pharmacist, handing you a bubbly concoction featuring calming herbs, or more likely, something that would get you flagged at airport security. In the early 1900s, anxiety wasn't treated with breathing exercises or mindfulness apps. It was tackled with carbonated cocktails of herbs, alcohol, caffeine, and a whisper of narcotics. Nerve tonics were the emotional support sodas of their day, delivered with a smile and absolutely no warning labels. You'd stroll into the pharmacy with a case of the vapors, or maybe you'd simply been thinking too much about mortality and factory fires, and you'd be met with an enthusiastic recommendation for a fizzy drink that promised to fix your nerves and possibly unlock the secrets of the universe. These tonics came in thick glass bottles with labels that read like a thesaurus entry for vitality. They didn't just promise calm, they promised clarity, vigor, and a sudden urge to reorganize your entire parlor. Advertisements would claim things like, brings tranquility to the agitated soul, while quietly not mentioning that the tranquility came from enough morphine to lull a racehorse into a meditative state. The ingredients were usually a greatest hits of the apothecary shelf: valerian root, chamomile, skullcap, and catnip for the herbalists, caffeine, cola nut, and coca extract for the bold, and, depending on the brand, just a little laudanum or opium tincture for the truly committed. The idea was to calm the nerves while also somehow making you feel sharp and ready to write your memoir in one sitting. This is what passed for balance. The popularity of nerve tonics grew in tandem with the stresses of modern life. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing. Cities were noisy, and people were, for the first time, expected to sit still at desks for 9 hours a day without throwing a hammer out the window. Society needed a way to cope, and nothing says coping like a mildly addictive bubbly syrup with enough stimulant to restart a telegraph machine. It wasn't just the overworked men of the city turning to nerve tonics. These drinks were heavily marketed to women, especially those suffering from the ever-mysterious and wildly overdiagnosed condition known as female hysteria. Doctors, with their infinite wisdom, decided that the proper solution for everything from anxiety to restlessness to the overwhelming burden of existing while female was, you guessed it, a fizzy nerve tonic and maybe a vacation from having thoughts. A typical nerve tonic experience might go like this. You walk into the drugstore feeling overwhelmed by life, unsure whether it's your job, your marriage, or the horse-drawn streetcar that nearly flattened you this morning. The pharmacist nods with understanding, reaches for a bottle of Dr. Langley's invigorating nerve compound, and hands you a glass of what tastes like fizzy licorice dipped in despair. You sip, and suddenly everything is fine. Your hands stop shaking, your mind slows down. You no longer care about rent, deadlines, or whether or not the milkman is flirting with your spouse. You feel cured, which is impressive, considering you may have just consumed tinctured belladonna and a modest amount of ether. Eventually, like all good things in history that were too fun to last, the nerve tonic craze was curbed by emerging regulations. The Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 required manufacturers to actually list what was in their products, which put a bit of a damper on tonics. containing ingredients that doubled as sedatives, stimulants, or mild poisons. Suddenly, consumers began questioning whether soothing syrup number 9 should in fact make your vision blur slightly and cause spontaneous giggling. Today, nerve tonics exist mostly as herbal teas and sleepy time supplements sold in wellness aisles. The wild fizz and pharmaceutical flair are gone, replaced with sleepy bears and chamomile flowers, but the dream lives on. The idea that calm can come from a bottle, and that the solution to a fraying mind is just one weirdly flavored sip away. So next time you're anxious, just be glad your options don't include carbonated opium. Unless you're nostalgic for a time when mental health came in 12-ounce bottles and every burp brought a touch of euphoria. At the dawn of the soda wars, every company was shoveling in caffeine like it was going out of style. Who could make your heart race faster? And why was that considered a selling point? Welcome to the golden age of carbonated chaos, when the caffeine content in your drink was less about taste and more about launching your soul into orbit. This was a time when soda companies weren't just selling beverages, they were selling experiences. You didn't just drink a soda, you survived it. The more your hands trembled after finishing a glass, the more effective it was considered. Side effects like sleep loss, eye twitching, and the sudden ability to alphabetize your bookshelf at 3 a.m. were not seen as problems, they were selling points. In the early 1900s, soda brands began one-upping each other with increasingly bold formulations. Caffeine, long known for its stimulating effects, became the darling of the industry. It was cheap, legal, and potent. And best of all, nobody really knew how much was too much. The logic was simple. If a little bit of caffeine helped you stay awake through your boss's Monday morning monologue, then a lot of caffeine might help you enjoy it, or at least outtalk him, so they added it. Liberally, enthusiastically, recklessly, and they told you it was for your health. Brands claimed their drinks revitalized and restored. What they didn't mention was that many of these sodas had more buzz than a jazz quartet on espresso. Some drinks packed as much caffeine as 4 modern colas, with none of the helpful disclaimers or warning labels. And that was the appeal. You weren't drinking soda, you were turbocharging your bloodstream. Take Coca-Cola, for example. Even after it dropped the cocaine from its formula, Psy, it still held onto caffeine like a security blanket. Meanwhile, competitors like Pepsi weren't about to be outdone. Each brand wanted to be the drink that powered your workday, your night shift, or your 3-day barn-raising event with no bathroom breaks. Soda ads didn't whisper, they shouted. "Drink this and feel alive," was the subtext of nearly every campaign. Bonus points if you also felt vaguely invincible and temporarily unaware of your own blinking. As the caffeine content climbed, so did the creativity. Brands threw in other stimulants for fun: cola nut, guarana, yerba mate, and anything else that sounded vaguely exotic and vaguely legal. The result was a spectrum of sodas ranging from mildly refreshing to heart palpitations with bubbles. And still, people couldn't get enough. Soda fountains became battlegrounds of buzz. Patrons would compare drinks not by flavor, but by effectiveness. "This one made my ears ring, but I still felt sluggish," one man might say, while another proudly claimed, "I drank 2 of these and painted my house without touching the ground." In these competitive, jittery times, a good soda didn't just quench thirst, it gave you the illusion of productivity, plus a brief window of clairvoyance. And who were the biggest customers? Students, laborers, traveling salesmen, factory workers, anyone who needed to stay alert but couldn't afford to nap for 4 hours or make life choices like go to bed early. Women, too, were targeted, especially homemakers who had to cook, clean, raise 6 children, churn butter, and knit a scarf before sundown. a swig of energy tonic soda, and suddenly you were folding laundry at the speed of sound. Eventually, health officials began raising their eyebrows. People were walking into pharmacies, shaking like maracas, and it wasn't because of the flu. Concerns about caffeine dependency and overexcitation of the nerves became harder to ignore. Lawsuits and legislation started trickling in. And slowly, soda companies were forced to scale back, or at least stop advertising their drinks as the solution to both sleep and consciousness. Still, the arms race never really ended. Today, we just call them energy drinks. They're the spiritual successors to the colas of the past, loaded with caffeine, vitamins, taurine, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, you'll finish that email before the anxiety hits. So next time you sip a can of something labeled maximum charge, remember, you're part of a long tradition of humans who willingly drank liquids that made their hearts race and called it refreshment. Sleep is optional. Fizz is forever. Yes, there was a time when medicinal meant your orange soda might contain a smidge of cocaine, a pinch of codeine, and just enough sugar to keep you from noticing the taste. It's the early 1900s, and you've got a headache, a cough, and a vague sense of spiritual unrest. You step into the local drugstore, where the pharmacist, wearing a bow tie and a deeply misplaced sense of confidence, slides you a glass of something bubbly, orange, and suspiciously effervescent. You take a sip. It tastes like tangerine and ambition. 10 minutes later, you no longer remember why you were upset or where you live, but your headache is gone, your cough is gone, and you suddenly feel capable of organizing a 3-day festival in your backyard. The soda worked. This was a time when the word medicinal was basically a loophole. Everything was medicinal. Cough syrup? Medicinal. Fizzy lemon drink? Medicinal. Spiked root beer brewed in a bathtub behind the pharmacy? Definitely medicinal. As long as it was vaguely sweet and contained something with a Latin name, you could sell it as a cure-all for everything from bad moods to foot cramps. And you could do it without even bothering to include a dosage. Cocaine was a crowd favorite. It was extracted from the coca leaf and praised for its ability to make you feel alert, happy, and, for a brief but glorious window, like you could outrun a train. Early sodas laced with coca extract weren't even hiding it. Ads would gleefully proclaim the invigorating qualities of their coca-infused recipes, promising energy, focus, and the mild sensation of being God's favorite. But why stop there? If your headache persisted, why not add a dash of codeine? It was a common ingredient in everything from cough drops to soda tonics. After all, if a customer is coughing and sad, why not offer them a fizzy drink that gently suppresses the central nervous system? Nothing says get well soon like a syrupy cocktail that slows your breathing just enough to make you stop caring about your symptoms altogether. The idea was simple. Mask your problems in sugar and sedation, and people loved it. These drinks didn't just taste good, they worked. You didn't feel better eventually. You felt better now. Your cold? Gone. Your anxiety? Replaced with an almost supernatural calm. Your sciatica? What even is that? Pass me another glass of that magical orange elixir, good sir. What's amazing is how casually all of this was served. There were no prescriptions, no warnings, and certainly no concern for habit-forming substances. Parents gave these drinks to their children. Teachers sipped them between classes. Factory workers chugged them on lunch break and returned to the assembly line with a renewed sense of purpose and slightly shaky hands. The branding was pure gold. Products with names like Dr. Barclay's Soothing Syrup, Golden Elixir of Vitality, or Captain Bill's Coca Cordial lined the shelves. Labels would promise relief from all afflictions of the head, chest, and soul. They might as well have added, also cures mild, existential dread and taxes. Eventually, science, grumpy, sensible science, caught up. The Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 rolled in like the chaperone at a high school dance, demanding to know what exactly was in these miracle tonics. Suddenly, companies were forced to label ingredients, and now, with 20 milligrams of cocaine, didn't test well with regulators. Codeine became a controlled substance. Coca extracts were decocainized, and soda slowly transitioned from an upper-class prescription to a mass-market treat. But the spirit of those days lingers. Every time you pop open a cold can of citrusy bliss, you're sipping on the history of a time when soda didn't just promise refreshment, it promised transcendence, relaxation, and maybe just a hint of moral ambiguity. So next time you take a sip of Fanta or root beer and think, not bad, remember, once upon a time, that same drink might have changed your whole personality, or at least helped you nap through it. Not just for cowboys, sarsaparilla and root beer began life as herbal remedies, bubbling with sassy roots and, on occasion, suspiciously mind-altering additives. Before they became staples at county fairs and summer barbecues, sarsaparilla and root beer were basically bubbling potions of hope. Picture yourself in the mid-1800s. Stomach in knots, skin covered in something vaguely rash-like, and zero access to a dermatologist. The apothecary slides a wooden mug across the counter. It smells like licorice, campfire, and possibly regret. "Drink this," he says. "It's good for your blood." You hesitate. "Is that bark?" He nods. "Yes. And roots. Lots of roots. Trust the roots." These drinks were made from a wild and wonderful grab bag of natural ingredients. Things like sassafras bark, sarsaparilla root, birch oil, wintergreen, licorice, and sometimes even molasses if they were feeling fancy. The idea was that Mother Nature had all the answers, and most of them were buried underground. If it was bitter, sticky, and difficult to pronounce, it went in the bottle. Sarsaparilla, in particular, was believed to purify the blood, a favorite Victorian concept that meant almost nothing medically but sounded very responsible. Root beer had similar vibes. Originally brewed by hand and often fermented slightly, which gave it a mild alcoholic kick and the ability to make you feel like maybe your skin condition wasn't that bad after all. And then there were the additives. These weren't your average vitamins. In the early days, it wasn't uncommon to spike your herbal brew with opium derivatives, cocaine, or belladonna. Yes, belladonna. An actual poison that, in small amounts, was believed to relieve pain and induce relaxation, which is a very generous way of describing what happens when you drink something that can also kill a raccoon. People drank these brews not for taste, but for transformation. You didn't just want to feel better. You wanted to feel cleansed, renewed, spiritually exfoliated. A glass of sarsaparilla didn't just soothe your cough. It reset your life, or at least gave you a long enough nap that you forgot why you were coughing in the first place. Cowboys made sarsaparilla famous in pop culture, but truthfully, most of them probably drank it with a very confused expression. "What is this?" they likely asked. "And why does it taste like spicy root mulch?" But it worked. Or it seemed to work. And when your daily life included snake bites, sunstroke, and saddle sores, a cold drink that tasted vaguely medicinal was better than nothing, and leagues better than water that might give you cholera. Root beer, meanwhile, slowly evolved from a murky medicinal tonic into something more palatable. By the late 1800s, Brands like Hire's Root Beer were bottling the stuff and advertising it as a health drink for the whole family. Yes, it had sugar. Yes, it had carbonation, but it also had roots, and that meant it was practically a salad. Some of the early blends were slightly alcoholic. Others were fizzy, but non-alcoholic. All of them were marketed with wild promises. Root beer was said to cleanse your organs, invigorate your brain, ease childbirth, a bold claim, and even extend your life. You could be dying of dysentery and still be told, "Here, drink this. It's got bark in it." Eventually, as with all good things, regulations came in and politely asked people to stop putting psychoactive substances in drinks aimed at children. Sassafras, one of the signature ingredients, was banned in large quantities after scientists discovered that it might cause cancer in lab rats who consumed, say, a bathtub's worth of it. Today's root beer still has the sweet herbal flavor, but the sass is artificially recreated. No real sassafras, no hallucinogenic additives, and sadly, no spiritual blood cleansing. Still, there's something magical about sipping root beer. Something ancient. A memory of a time when healing came from a bubbling mug of twigs, bark, and blind faith in the forest. So next time you crack open a can, take a moment, sip slowly, and imagine your ancestors staring into their wooden mugs, wondering if that aftertaste was wintergreen or just the start of a very interesting afternoon. What do you get when you mix celery extract, caffeine, and a heap of wishful thinking? Celery cola, the world's first green juice with a personality disorder. It's the early 1900s, and wellness is booming. People are obsessed with purity, digestion, and whatever it takes to live long enough to yell at their great-grandchildren. Somewhere between the rise of temperance and the invention of nerve food, some daring pharmacist looks at a stalk of celery and thinks, this could be a drink, possibly even a caffeinated drink, for health, and somehow nobody stops him. Enter celery cola. The branding is bold, the claims are suspiciously confident, the liquid itself is unsettlingly green adjacent, but none of that matters, because the idea behind it is so strange it almost feels brilliant. In a world where people thought Coca-Cola cured headaches and Vin Mariani gave you the strength of 10 popes, celery seemed like a safe bet. Vegetables are good for you, right? Caffeine keeps you going. Combine them? Surely you get some kind of miracle elixir. Except you don't. What you get is a fizzy beverage that tastes like soda someone drank next to a salad. It wasn't exactly bad, just confusing. Sweet, but vaguely vegetal, herbal, but also peppy, like biting into a stalk of celery that's been carbonated, dipped in sugar, and triple distilled through marketing copy. Still, celery cola was a hit for a while. It rode the wave of vegetable therapy. A delightful moment in history when people earnestly believed that if your nerves were fried, the only solution was liquefied plants plus a kick of stimulant. It was bottled, branded, and sold with all the charm of a snake oil salesman in a bowler hat, promising better digestion, cleaner blood, and nerves as steady as a lighthouse. The soda was often marketed toward professional people, which, in 1900, was code for anyone who had to wear a tie and lie about liking it. Office workers, teachers, telegraph operators, anyone feeling a bit frazzled from the thrilling new stress of industrialization was told to chug some celery fizz and push through. It was positioned as the healthy alternative to coffee, liquor, and despair. And for a time, it seemed like the world agreed. You'd walk into a pharmacy and see it right there on the shelf next to cola tonics and digestive bitters. You'd order one at the soda fountain and pretend, just for a moment, that you were doing something good for your body, despite the fact that it contained as much caffeine as any other soda and probably more sugar than a pie. Then came the copycats, because if one celery soda could make people feel briefly righteous and mildly awake, surely 5 could turn celery into a full-on beverage empire. Soon, there was celery phosphate, celery tonic. Dr. Brown's Celery, a New York Jewish deli classic that somehow still exists today and tastes exactly like fizzy pickle juice made by someone who regrets their career choices. But as with many historical beverage fads, the celery craze eventually withered. By the 1920s, people had moved on to more exciting and more palatable options. The health claims grew quieter, the bottles collected dust, and celery retreated to its rightful place next to buffalo wings. And as garnish no one eats at cocktail parties. Today, celery cola lives on only in dusty collector's bottles and the occasional brave deli order, but it represents something timeless. The human ability to take something mildly healthy, add caffeine and carbonation, and convince ourselves that we've invented medicine. We wanted a vegetable that could heal our nerves and sharpen our minds. What we got was soda that tasted like anxiety and chlorophyll. So next time you're sipping a kale smoothie and pretending it tastes fine, just remember, your ancestors did the same thing with celery soda, and they too lied to themselves the whole way down. You don't just order a soda, you confide in the soda jerk, a proto-barista and low-key pharmacist who might hand you a cherry phosphate for heartbreak and a bromo for hangovers. In the golden, syrupy days of the early 1900s, the soda fountain wasn't just a place to get refreshment, it was your community's most stylish chemical experiment. And the person running that operation? The soda jerk. He wasn't a jerk in the modern sense, he was called that because of the jerking motion used to pull the fountain lever. Though, depending on how busy the place was, he might have also been a little cranky. The soda jerk was equal parts mixologist, therapist, chemist, and town gossip. Clad in a crisp white jacket, bow tie slightly askew, he stood behind a marble counter like a wizard behind his potion table. Rows of syrups, extracts, tonics, and mystery bottles lined the shelves, each one promising to solve a different problem, real or imagined. He was the man who could fix your upset stomach, your sleep troubles, your anxiety, your heartbreak, and your need to feel something, anything, after a long day at the typewriter. You didn't just order from the soda jerk. You confessed. You sat down on the rotating stool and spilled your soul. My boss doesn't know my name. My kid failed Latin again. My neighbor borrowed my lawn shears and never gave them back. The soda jerk would nod solemnly, reach for a bottle of something bitter, fizzy, and vaguely illegal in some states, and slide it across the counter with the precision of someone who's been saving the town one bromo seltzer at a time. And oh, the drinks he could make. Cherry phosphates, lime rickeys, coca tonics, celery sodas, iron tonics, wild root bitters. Some had caffeine, some had codeine, some had a flavor profile somewhere between minty fresh and dirt with ambition. You didn't question what was in them, and frankly, you didn't want to. The magic was in the mystery. For teenagers, the soda jerk was the gateway to cool. He knew all the slang. He wore his hair slicked back with too much pomade. He gave you extra whipped cream if he liked you, or fewer judging glances if you ordered something weird, like butterscotch phosphate with egg. For the working adults, he was the midday miracle worker, helping you rally after a sleepless night or endure yet another 3-hour town council meeting. And for the elderly, he was the last stop before switching to prune juice and bitter pills. The soda jerk could tell what kind of day you were having based on the way you sat on the stool. Slumped? You needed something bubbly and citrusy. Tense shoulders? That called for vanilla and a splash of something herbal. blank stare into the distance? That was a job for a chocolate malt and a pep talk. He wasn't licensed to prescribe medication, but somehow everyone trusted him more than their actual doctor, probably because he gave you something that tasted like childhood and made your limbs tingle, or maybe just because the pharmacist had started locking the cabinet, labeled experimental nerve treatments. Eventually, as soda fountains disappeared and modern medicine caught up with, well, reality, the role of the soda jerk faded. Their place was taken by baristas and bartenders, and the soda counter became a nostalgic relic. But their legacy lives on in every custom order, every "just trust me, this will fix it" concoction, and every beverage served with a side of understanding. So next time you're at a coffee shop and someone hands you an oat milk vanilla cold foam shaken espresso with the confidence of a man who's seen things, give a quiet nod to the soda jerks who came before him. Because once upon a time, your mental health was handled by a guy named Buddy who wore a bow tie and handed out carbonated hope for a nickel. In the 1900s, doctors prescribed soda for headaches, exhaustion, stomach aches, and, if you were lucky, the mild existential crisis that comes from living in a time when cars and horses share the road. This was a golden age of optimism, when medical professionals genuinely believed that most human suffering could be solved with a fizzy beverage and a vague sense of wonder. You walk into a doctor's office with a sore throat, and instead of antibiotics or stern instructions to rest, you're handed a bottle of carbonated root tonic with a label that reads, "For congestion, melancholy, and sudden urges to question the nature of time." And you drink it, because it's 1902, and the alternative is being told your humors are out of balance. Doctors at the time were working with the best tools they had, mainly guesswork, botanical enthusiasm, and an unshakable belief that bubbles could fix the body. If you were tired, you got a cola tonic. If you were anxious, a celery soda. Nausea? Try some ginger beer, laced with bitters, and a subtle reminder that no one has invented Dramamine yet. For migraines, you might be handed a lemon phosphate. For heartbreak, a vanilla phosphate and a pat on the shoulder. And for everything else, something brown and fizzy should do the trick. It wasn't just soda as a side treatment. It was soda as the treatment. Doctors wrote it down. Pharmacists mixed it up. Even health magazines declared soda-based tonics the future of medicine. The idea was that the carbonation helped with digestion, the sugar gave you energy, and the secret ingredients, usually a blend of herbs, caffeine, and possibly something banned today, would stimulate the system. Which is a nice way of saying, you'll be so buzzed, you forget you're sick. These prescriptions weren't limited to adults. Children were regular recipients of soda medicine. Have a cold? Cough syrup with cola base. Can't sleep? A calming phosphate, with just enough codeine to make your dreams smell like licorice. Some of these drinks were spiked with quinine to treat fevers, others loaded with caffeine to restore vitality. None of them had instructions. Dosage was a vibe. And it wasn't just general practitioners, dentists too, got in on the action. They'd offer you a soda post-cleaning for the nerves. Ophthalmologists would recommend root tonic to strengthen the vision, which is both wildly unscientific and charmingly confident. Even veterinarians prescribed cola derivatives to horses with indigestion. Yes, horses. Even your livestock wasn't safe from the soda craze. Of course, some people saw the obvious problem. Sugar, caffeine, and mystery herbs probably weren't fixing most ailments. But in an age before antibiotics, antiseptics, or basic sanitation in most towns, soda felt modern, clean, controlled. It fizzed, and anything that fizzed surely had magic powers. There was something inherently reassuring about a drink that made your nose tickle and your symptoms fade. Temporarily, at least. Over time, as science got louder and regulatory boards finally got tired of chasing pharmacists who played fast and loose with coca leaf extract, the soda prescription fad faded. Slowly, bottles of nerve tonic and digestive root elixir vanished from pharmacy shelves, replaced by actual medicine. But the idea that a good soda could make a bad day better, that stuck around. Today, when you crack open a cold one because you just need something, you're participating in a long, caffeinated tradition. You might not be treating your cold, your headache, or your minor emotional collapse, but you're definitely chasing the echo of a time when doctors genuinely believed a fizzy drink could realign your soul. So next time you're sipping cola for comfort, raise a toast to the doctors who wrote prescriptions on the backs of napkins, handed out soda like sacred water, and believed, if only for a little while, that the answer to everything was carbonation and hope. From posters promising cheerfulness in every bottle to ads that all but guarantee enlightenment, soda marketing was less about honesty and more about selling the dream of eternal energy. And sell it they did. Early soda advertisements weren't just enthusiastic. They were full-blown literary hallucinations. You'd see elegant ladies on velvet couches sipping root tonics with blissful grins, men in three-piece suits lifting glasses like they'd just solved aging, and children, actual children, beaming while chugging something that today would be classified as a stimulant-laced syrup. According to the ads, soda didn't just refresh you, it revitalized your soul, made your brain sparkle, and possibly cured your melancholy over that one time you coughed during church and got publicly shamed for it. Marketing teams took full advantage of the era's blurry line between medicine and beverage. A drink could legally be both invigorating and curative, even if what it mostly did was give you a sugar high and make your eye twitch for 6 hours. Slogans like, "It picks you up," and restores youth and vigor, weren't seen as exaggerations. They were accepted truth. If someone told you a drink could solve your digestive problems, increase your productivity, and make you more pleasant to be around, you didn't question it. You thanked them and asked for a second bottle. And the graphics? Oh, the graphics. Soda posters were dripping with surreal optimism. Wide-eyed testimonials from fictional people were paired with phrases like reliably cheerful, absolutely pure, and the intelligent person's choice. It was emotional manipulation with calligraphy. You'd be standing in a pharmacy thinking, "I came in for bandages," and leave with a case of sparkling celery soda because a smiling mustachioed man on a poster promised you better social standing and clearer skin. Many of these ads leaned heavily into the idea of energy. Tired? Drink this. Sluggish? Drink this. Depressed? Definitely drink this, and maybe stop asking so many questions. The message was clear. Feeling human was a problem. Feeling superhuman was the goal. And all it took was one bubbling bottle of fizz with a suspiciously long ingredient list. Some companies advertised their sodas as intellectual aids. Yes, really. Sharpen the mind, they'd promise, sometimes with fake endorsements from professors, poets, or the occasional inventor. One famous campaign suggested that their tonic made it easier to concentrate on books, thereby subtly implying that soda could replace higher education if you just drank enough of it. Others went the emotional route. They sold soda as a social lubricant, perfect for picnics, garden parties, and awkward dinner table silences. Bring people together, the ad would whisper, while showing a family laughing over tall glasses of something vaguely cherry-colored and probably infused with quinine, caffeine, and hope. Even religion got roped in. Some sodas were blessed by respected community figures, or in the case of Vin Mariani, literally endorsed by the Pope. If divine approval doesn't move product, what will? There was a soda for every moment of your day. A wake-up soda, a mid-morning soda, a post-lunch digestive soda, and a sleepy time nerve tonic soda. You didn't just drink to live, you lived to drink. Preferably while gazing thoughtfully into the middle distance, as all good advertisements suggested. Eventually, regulations tightened, and the wildest claims had to be toned down. Cures your sadness was replaced with a refreshing beverage. But even today, echoes of that era remain. Energy drinks promise focus and power. Wellness sodas offer balance and calm. The packaging still smiles at you like a friend who absolutely did not lie on their resume. So next time you see a soda commercial where someone leaps off a cliff into the ocean after one sip, remember, you are witnessing a century-long tradition of hyperbole, a celebration of carbonated joy wrapped in sparkle and illusion. And honestly, it still works. Because deep down, we all want to believe that our next cold drink might just change our lives, or at the very least, get us through the next awkward Zoom call. With alcohol on the way out for about 5 minutes, soft drinks filled the void, except that a lot of them were basically still drugs, just with a little more fizz and a better PR team. It's the late 19th century, and the moral spotlight is shining bright. The temperance movement is in full swing, and America is in the throes of a grand experiment. What if we told people to stop drinking alcohol and then offered them something even more suspicious in a fancy bottle? Enter soft drinks, the sugar-coated, bubble-blessed substitutes for whiskey, gin, and whatever your cousin brewed in a jug behind his barn. Temperance leaders weren't wrong about alcohol being a problem. Taverns were overflowing, public drunkenness was rampant, and bar fights could be started by someone sneezing too loudly. But the alternative they endorsed turned out to be equally intoxicating, just dressed up in white froth and wholesome fonts. Soda fountains sprang up everywhere, particularly in pharmacies, where they were seen as respectable places for socializing. And what better place to promote clean living than a counter loaded with caffeinated sugar water, flavored syrups, and a grab bag of ingredients pulled from the back of a chemistry textbook? Soda became the respectable vice, something you could enjoy in daylight, without judgment, and still technically claim you were on the wagon. The irony, of course, is that many of these soft drinks were anything but soft. Sure, they didn't contain alcohol, at least not always, but they more than made up for it with caffeine, coca leaf extract, cola nut derivatives, and invigorating botanicals that wouldn't pass a modern ingredient review without a few raised eyebrows and a phone call to poison control. Temperance might have kicked the booze, but it replaced it with liquid stimulants in fancy glassware. You'd walk into a soda fountain and order a temperance drink, thinking you were making a moral choice. What you were actually ordering was something that could probably power a small generator. The drink sparkled. It burned slightly on the way down. It made your skin feel electric. But it wasn't alcohol. So it must be healthy, right? For soda companies, this was an advertising goldmine. They leaned into the morality angle hard. Pure, wholesome, family-friendly. These were the buzzwords. You weren't just enjoying a beverage. You were part of a movement, a bubbly revolution of clean living refreshment. A single glass could refresh your soul, reset your nerves, and cleanse your conscience. Sunday school in a bottle. Even Prohibition itself, which kicked off in 1920, didn't slow things down. It accelerated the soft drink boom. With bars shuttered and saloons banned, soda fountains filled the social gap. They offered the same ambiance, minus the hangovers and axe-wielding temperance crusaders. People still gathered, chatted, gossiped, and made bad decisions, just now over root beer floats and nerve tonics instead of whiskey. Some soda companies didn't even bother pretending. They kept the intoxicating feel, the elegant packaging, and the vague medicinal claims. If anything, the drinks got more intense. Bromo seltzer, celery cola, and lithium-based sodas. Yes, really, made their mark as uplifting alternatives. If you didn't leave the counter vibrating slightly, was it even worth the nickel? By the time Prohibition ended in 1933, soft drinks had completely entrenched themselves in American life. They were no longer a substitute. They were the drink. And even though alcohol came roaring back, soda stayed put. Why? Because by then, everyone was addicted to the branding, to the bubbles, and maybe just a little bit to the caffeine-laced optimism in every glass. So next time someone says, "It's just a soft drink," remember, that fizzy treat has a wild past. Born from reform, raised in pharmacies, and fueled by marketing teams who could sell a root tonic to a monk, it's not just a drink, it's a survivor of moral panic, social engineering, and the deeply American tendency to replace one vice with another as long as it comes with ice. The line between soda and medicine was blurrier than a Victorian hangover. Tonics, elixirs, and cures disguised as refreshments were peddled to anyone with a pulse and a nickel. Welcome to the golden age of allegedly healing beverages, when your local pharmacist doubled as a mixologist, fortune teller, and part-time illusionist. This was a world where a bottle of carbonated syrup could promise to cure your cough, soothe your nerves, and possibly reveal the KPH secrets of the cosmos. The only catch? None of it was regulated, or tested, or, true. Patent medicines were everywhere. If you had a complaint, any complaint, you could be sure there was a drink for that. Indigestion? Try Dr. Chalmers Gut Tonic. Now with 80% more sassafras and 40% less self-doubt. Sore joints? Sip on Old Doc Bixby's Miracle Fluid, which contained equal parts mystery and morphine. Existential dread? There's always Professor Wigglesworth's cheerful syrup, now in lemon lime. And then there were the sodas. Bright, bubbly, and oh so inviting. These drinks tiptoed right up to the line of medicine and then danced over it in tap shoes. Companies proudly labeled their concoctions, remedies, or invigorators, claiming they could treat anything from gout to tired blood, which is a real condition if you believe hard enough and ignore science entirely. Carbonation itself was considered therapeutic. Bubbles weren't just fun, they were proof of life. Something about the fizz made people trust what they were drinking, as if the tingling on the tongue confirmed the potion was doing something. Never mind that doing something sometimes included mild hallucinations or the sudden urge to reorganize your pantry at 3 a.m. One popular ingredient was alcohol, lots of it. Many so-called tonics contained more booze than the bar down the street. But because they were sold in pharmacies and flavored with herbs, people called them medicinal and took them at breakfast. The logic was simple. If it didn't kill you, it must be good for you. And if it did kill you, well, at least you weren't suffering anymore. Other formulas leaned into narcotics. Opium, morphine, heroin, yes, even heroin, showed up in early drinks marketed to housewives and children. These were considered nerve-calming agents, though they worked a bit too well. One famous example? Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, intended for teething infants, contained enough morphine to put an adult elephant in a good mood. And let's not forget the cocaine crowd. Coca wine, Coca-Cola, Coca cordials, all proudly advertised as energizing, focusing, and mildly euphoric. You didn't just feel better. You felt like dancing on a rooftop while reciting Shakespeare backward. These products had zero chill, maximum sparkle, and not a single warning label in sight. The genius of patent medicines wasn't just the ingredients, it was the marketing. Testimonials from satisfied customers, who may or may not have existed, promised miraculous recoveries. Posters depicted glowing mothers, robust children, and impossibly dapper old men, all sipping mystery liquids and beaming like they'd just won a staring contest with God. And of course, everything was scientific. Labels were adorned with Latin names, diagrams of digestive tracts, and hand-drawn signatures from people claiming to be doctors. Bonus points if the bottle was wrapped in gold foil or came with a little booklet, full of vaguely threatening medical jargon. Eventually, the US government stepped in with the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906, asking the extremely reasonable question, what the heck is in this stuff? Companies were forced to disclose ingredients, which, unsurprisingly, put a damper on public enthusiasm. Sales dropped, formulas were revised. The age of unregulated fizzy medicine faded into history, but the legacy lives on. Today's sodas may not claim to cure scurvy or make you emotionally whole, but they still sparkle with the promise of brief, sugary joy. So next time you crack open a can and feel a little better, just know you're sipping in the footsteps of people who once believed their cola could heal their body, uplift their spirit, and possibly cure their goat. And honestly, that's some pretty solid branding. You're 8 years old. You just drank a soda with enough caffeine to jumpstart a Model T. Your parents are delighted. Until bedtime. It's the early 20th century, and children are not only allowed to drink soda, they're encouraged to. Health tonic? Sure. Nerve stabilizer? Definitely. Dessert? Absolutely. You, a third grader with a questionable grasp on fractions, are now fully carbonated and sprinting in circles like you've just discovered velocity. And why wouldn't you be? The drink was handed to you by a smiling adult in a pressed white coat who assured your mother it was fortifying. In this era, soda was not just a treat. It was part of your development. Forget baby food and warm milk. A child of the 1900s could regularly enjoy fizzy elixirs with names like Youthful Zest, Junior Pep, or Dr. Smiley's Nerve Syrup, none of which sound even remotely safe in hindsight. These drinks promised to give kids vitality and focus, which was old-timey code for high-octane Zoom fuel, and these sodas weren't exactly gentle. While today's sodas contain moderate caffeine and enough sugar to keep you humming through math class, early formulations were an entirely different beast. We're talking caffeine levels that could awaken the dead, sugar content that made dentists weep, and mystery ingredients that may or may not have included opiates, coca derivatives, or substances labeled simply as botanical agents. Naturally, kids loved them. You'd be bouncing off the walls, eyes wide, shirt untucked, trying to recite the entire Gettysburg Address backward, while also inventing your own martial art. Your teacher would ask a question about geography, and you'd answer in interpretive dance. Your mother, meanwhile, would sit proudly by, holding the soda bottle like a chalice and saying things like, "He's never been this alert." Of course, bedtime was another story. You, the child, would be tucked into bed like a freshly shaken bottle of chaos. Lights off, covers on, and within minutes you're sitting up asking deep philosophical questions no 8-year-old should be pondering. Do worms have dreams? Can time be folded? What happens if I never blink again? Your parents would pace the hallway, quietly reconsidering their beverage choices while you practiced cartwheels and planned your future as a train conductor, zoologist, and balloon inventor all at once. Marketing to children wasn't just allowed, it was strategic. Soda companies put cartoon animals, comic book ads, and catchy jingles everywhere. A glass of soda wasn't just a drink, it was a badge of coolness. It meant you were grown up enough to handle carbonation. You could hang at the soda fountain, order with confidence, and pretend your root beer float was an actual cocktail. And let's not forget birthday parties. Nothing said childhood joy like lining up a dozen children, each double-fisting bottles of hyperactive syrup, and then letting them loose in a carpeted room filled with breakable items. It was like setting off fireworks in a pillow fort. Giggles became shrieks. Chairs became jungle gyms. One child, inevitably, tried to ride the family dog. Eventually, adults caught on, pediatricians, sleep-deprived parents, and the occasional teacher who lost control of a classroom full of cola-fueled 9-year-olds began to raise the alarm. The soda as child medication era began to fizzle. Labels were added. Ingredients were toned down. Cartoon mascots were gently retired. But the damage and the tradition was done. Today, we worry about kids drinking soda for entirely different reasons. Dental health, obesity, screen time. But at least we don't have to worry that little Timmy's orange fizz contains 12 milligrams of morphine and a tiny whisper of hallucination. Progress. So the next time your niece or nephew is bouncing after a can of cola, take a breath. Remind yourself, it could be worse. It was worse, and your ancestors somehow thought a caffeinated, carbonated 8-year-old was the picture of perfect childhood health. Bless them, and bless their poor, sleepless parents. No real laws, no real oversight, and absolutely no concern for long-term side effects. Just entrepreneurial spirit and a little bit of chloroform, if you're lucky. Welcome to the soda industry in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, also known as the golden age of let's put it in a bottle and see what happens. This was a time before the FDA had teeth, before ingredients were listed on labels, and before anyone thought, should we test this on people first? If you had a dream, a mustache, and access to a local printing press, you too could launch your own miracle beverage. All you needed was a handful of roots, something that fizzed, and one bold claim, like revitalizes your nerves or strengthens the spirit. From there, you slapped on a Latin-sounding name, filled some bottles, and boom, instant legacy. Or possibly, instant lawsuit. But that part came later. These sodas were the Wild West of wellness. Inventors and snake oil salesmen flocked to the soda business like moths to a glowing, vaguely medicinal flame. Every town had at least one local tonic promising vitality, focus, pain relief, digestion support, and spontaneous charisma. Never mind that half of them contained alcohol, opiates, or, yes, chloroform. The fizz was friendly, the syrup was sweet, and the placebo effect was doing most of the heavy lifting. Let's talk ingredients. You had your basic sugar and carbonated water, sure. But beyond that, the door was wide open. Want to add strychnine? Someone did. How about lithium salts, already done? Chloroform? Absolutely. In fact, chloroform was a semi-common addition in early pain relief drinks, because nothing says my headache is gone like unconsciousness. Other popular additives included turpentine, ether, cannabis extract, and essence of beef, which sounds more like an insult than a refreshment. This wasn't just tolerated, it was celebrated. Early advertisements glowed with confidence. They claimed their sodas cured female complaints, nervous agitation, melancholy, and the ever-popular tiredness of the soul. People lined up to try the newest elixirs, eager to sip something that made their fingers tingle and their responsibilities disappear. There were no government regulations to speak of, no required testing, no clinical trials. The only real rule was, try not to kill too many people, which, to be fair, most soda makers did follow, but only because death wasn't great for business. Unless, of course, you could spin it into a rebranding opportunity. Now, with 30% less chloroform, this era was marked by breathtaking confidence and breathtaking ingredients. The soda industry operated with the energy of a child playing mad scientist and the business ethics of a raccoon running a lemonade stand. If something made you feel buzzy, tingly, or just slightly more optimistic, it was considered a win. And the public? They loved it. Because back then, people wanted quick fixes. Life was hard. Labor was manual. Germ theory was new. Everyone was tired, stressed, or recovering from being kicked by a horse. If a soda could make you feel briefly immortal, you didn't ask too many questions. Eventually, in 1906, the Pure Food and Drug Act came along like a grumpy school principal and started asking, "What's actually in this?" And the answer was often, "We'd rather not say." Companies were forced to clean up their formulas, reduce the questionable additives, and stop marketing soda as a cure for everything from cancer to heartbreak. But for a brief, wild window of history, soda wasn't just a drink. It was an unregulated dream, a frothy, fizzy fantasy built on sugar, bravado, and whatever was lying around in the back of the apothecary's cabinet. So next time you sip a can of soda and think, "This tastes kind of chemical," just remember, it used to be way worse. And way more exciting. And possibly illegal in 4 states. Early soda ads didn't hide their secret ingredients, they bragged about them. Because who wouldn't want a beverage you'd crawl across town for at 3 a.m.? Back in the 1800s and early 1900s, the concept of addiction wasn't something you feared, it was something you marketed. In fact, being habit-forming was practically a badge of honor. The more likely you were to crave it in the middle of the night and elbow a priest to get to it, the better. Customers didn't want moderation. They wanted miracles, preferably fizzy ones. And the soda companies delivered. Coca-Cola, the poster child for early soda innovation, famously included actual cocaine in its formula. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't downplayed. It was celebrated. Early ads described the drink as delightful, refreshing, and exhilarating, all of which sound suspiciously like someone trying to describe their first rave. The coca leaf wasn't just an ingredient, it was the star of the show, paired beautifully with caffeine in what can only be described as the beverage equivalent of strapping yourself to a rocket. Customers loved it. They raved about it, not figuratively, literally. People wrote letters to the company proclaiming that Coca-Cola gave them energy, clarity, and what they described as a sense of general brightness, which sounds lovely and mildly concerning. One testimonial even claimed the drink cured their writer's block, which is just one stimulant away from turning your kitchen table into a novel-writing battleground. And Coca-Cola was not alone. There was Cola Aid, Vin Mariani, Celery Cola, and countless others, all proudly advertising their mood-boosting, nerve-calming, energy-giving properties. These drinks didn't shy away from their effects. They leaned into them like a Victorian gentleman into a fainting couch. You'll feel better instantly. Relieves fatigue and worry. A daily necessity. These weren't just slogans, they were promises. And then came the glorious irony. Some brands literally called themselves habit-forming. One beverage, an obscure root tonic out of New York, promoted itself as the beverage you'll never want to live without. That's not a gentle suggestion. That's a threat with bubbles. Even the names screamed dependency. Dr. Feelgood's Nerve Restorer, Professor Happy's Elixir, the constant companion. These weren't beverages. They were codependents in a bottle, and the public ate it up, well, drank it up, because life was hard, jobs were exhausting, and the concept of therapy was mostly just read the Bible and take a walk. It wasn't just the ingredients that hooked people, it was the experience. You'd walk into a soda fountain, slump onto a stool, and the soda jerk would know what you needed, just by the bags under your eyes. He'd mix you something bright, bubbly, and suspiciously life-altering. One sip later, and your headache was gone, your taxes felt optional, and you were pretty sure you could run to Street, Louis, and back before dinner. The effects were real. People formed habits, daily visits, midnight cravings, just one more for the road orders. But at the time, no one saw that as a problem. If you were a little jumpy, a little over-energized, or occasionally had a racing heart after your third bottle, that just meant the soda was working. Eventually, science stepped in like a concerned aunt. As researchers began to understand how substances like cocaine, caffeine, and opiates worked in the body, and, more importantly, how withdrawal also worked, public opinion shifted. Laws tightened. Ingredients changed. Labels got more honest, and phrases like invigorating and uplifting gave way to contains caffeine, consume responsibly. But still, the spirit of the era lingers. Energy drinks, coffee chains, and sugar-packed sodas continue to promise us the same things. Clarity, happiness, productivity, and a tiny, legal buzz to get through the day. So next time you grab a soda to perk up, just remember, there was a time when being addicted to your drink was the goal. And let's be honest, it still kind of is. Enter the killjoys, the creation of the FDA and the first laws to ban, restrict, or at least make you label the amount of pick-me-up in your root beer. It's 1906. You've just finished drinking a fizzy beverage that claimed to cure fatigue, enhance focus, improve circulation, and possibly make you better at math. You feel amazing. You also can't blink. That might be the cocaine talking, or the caffeine, or the powdered goat pancreas. No one really knows anymore. But just as you're about to recommend it to your neighbor and their entire family, along comes the federal government with its least fun invention to date. Food and Drug Regulation. The Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 was the first real step toward what we now know as the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, also known, at the time, as the people who ruined everything. The government had finally decided that maybe, just maybe, people should know what's actually in their drinks before they take a swig and wake up on their neighbor's roof. Before this act, labeling was optional. Medicinal tonic could mean anything from sassafras and sugar to opium and optimism. Bottles didn't need to list ingredients, side effects, or dosage. You could fill a bottle with carbonated cough syrup, add a sprig of mint, and sell it as Dr. Harmony's energy beverage for ladies. No one could stop you. In fact, if it didn't actively kill someone within 24 hours, it was considered a success. But the FDA? They were not here for your nonsense. The Pure Food and Drug Act made it illegal to mislabel or misbrand products. If you said your soda cured headaches, it needed to actually do that, or at least not cause spontaneous fainting. If you included a narcotic, stimulant, or something the average bear shouldn't consume before driving a buggy, it had to be clearly labeled on the bottle. You couldn't just call it herbal cheer, potion, and hope for the best anymore. Soda companies were horrified. Suddenly, invigorating tonic contains caffeine and trace stimulants. Soothing syrup had to admit it was laced with morphine. Coca-Cola, in particular, had to walk back its proud cocaine heritage and start using decocainized coca leaves. Basically the same leaf, but minus the part that made you think you could fight a train. Advertising changed overnight. Gone were the bold claims of spiritual rebirth. In their place, more cautious wording, like refreshing, delightful, and best enjoyed in moderation, a phrase no one has ever truly understood. The sparkle was still there, but the wild-eyed promises? Toned down to a polite whisper. Of course, enforcement took time. There were loopholes, workarounds, and a lot of drinks quietly reformulated behind closed doors. Some companies leaned into the changes, marketing their beverages as safe alternatives to the more questionable options of the past. Others simply changed their labels and hoped no one noticed that the vitalizing essence in their tonic had been replaced with plain old sugar and food coloring. But one thing was clear. The soda free-for-all was over. The FDA had shown up with a clipboard and a squint, ready to ruin your euphoric buzz in the name of public health. And you know what? Maybe that was for the best. As fun as it was to drink something that made your teeth buzz and your thoughts race, it turns out people do like knowing whether their lemonade contains lithium. Call them picky. So next time you look at the back of your soda can and see a full ingredient list, remember, that used to be a mystery scroll. You didn't sip for flavor, you sipped for adventure. But thanks to the FDA, your root beer is now just root beer. Not a life-altering experience. Not a medical intervention. Just a drink. Boring? Maybe. But also, probably won't send you on a 3-day visionary journey through your pantry. So, you know progress. Every brand had a secret formula, and the only thing more mysterious than the recipe was how anyone managed to sleep after 2 glasses. In the world of early soda, nothing said, "Trust me," like a recipe you weren't allowed to see. These weren't just ingredients, they were sacred scrolls, alchemical blueprints, locked in safes and whispered about like they could summon dragons. Each soda company claimed to have one, and they guarded them with the intensity of a wizard protecting a spell that may or may not cause mild hallucinations and light gum numbness. Take Coca-Cola, for example. Merchandise 7X, the name of their top-secret flavor formula, sounds less like a drink additive and more like something you'd find in a Bond villain's laboratory. To this day, only a handful of people reportedly know the full recipe, and they aren't allowed to fly on the same plane in case a tragic airline mishap wipes out the global supply of cola. And sure, the secrecy worked. Nothing sells better than mystery, especially if that mystery makes your face twitch slightly after the 3rd sip. Secret formula was basically code for, "We won't tell you what's in this, but trust us. It's both legal and not technically hallucinogenic anymore." But secrecy wasn't just a marketing gimmick, it was a survival strategy. In a time before regulations, when every other pharmacist down the street was inventing their own health elixir, keeping your recipe locked away meant no one could copy it, test it, or discover that it was 12% sherry and 5% enthusiastic guesswork. Some formulas included botanical extracts, a delightful phrase that could mean mint, or it could mean something that used to be illegal in 6 countries but wasn't anymore because no one had gotten around to banning it. Others touted invigorating agents, which often translated to caffeine, cola nut, or just a casual splash of cocaine leaf. It was like a game of drinkable roulette. Will this make you feel awake, immortal, or just mildly itchy? Root beers and sarsaparillas were especially secretive. Every manufacturer insisted their blend of roots, barks, and spices was the original, handed down from someone's grandfather who lived to be 3 and claimed to have never sneezed. The result was a flavor profile best described as forest floor with a hint of nostalgia, and formulas no one could replicate without a minor in potion making. The brilliance of the secret formula wasn't just in what it hid, it was in what it suggested. That this soda was the answer. That this drink had been perfected. That if you drank the right one, you'd be sharper, stronger, calmer, or at the very least more pleasant to be around. And since no one could prove otherwise, the belief persisted. You weren't just drinking a soda. You were consuming a carefully engineered marvel that probably belonged in a museum or a vault beneath the Vatican. Even today, that secrecy lingers. Modern sodas still guard their flavor formulas like state secrets. Try to replicate Dr. Pepper, and you'll end up with something that tastes like spicy raisins and disappointment. Ask what's actually in Mountain Dew, and you'll get a list of ingredients. But none of them explain why it feels like liquid electricity. So, what was in those secret formulas? A little caffeine, a little sugar, some exotic spices, a lot of wishful thinking, and maybe, just maybe, something that made people feel like the world was just a bit brighter for 20 minutes. And really, that's the magic. Because in a time before Netflix, cold brew, or therapy apps, a mysterious fizzy drink with a taste you couldn't quite place was sometimes all you needed. You didn't have to know what was in it. You just had to believe it worked. And if you didn't sleep for 3 days, well, that's how you know it was working. With every neighborhood pharmacy turning into a party, soda fountains became the hub of social and sometimes slightly manic energy. Imagine walking into your local pharmacy not for medication, but for gossip, nervous energy, and a fizzy beverage that may or may not contain enough caffeine to power a sewing machine. Welcome to the early 1900s soda fountain. Part community center, part chemistry lab, part slightly unhinged after-school program. If today's coffee shops are about gentle indie music and laptop zombies, soda fountains were about clinking glasses, sugar highs, and a general disregard for bedtime. These fountains weren't tucked into the back. They were the main attraction. Gleaming marble counters, brass taps, rows of syrup bottles that looked like they belonged in an apothecary, and one very sweaty soda jerk trying to keep up with a gaggle of teenagers arguing over who got the extra cherry. It was beautiful chaos. If you wanted peace and quiet, you went to the library. If you wanted to feel alive and slightly jittery, you went to the fountain. This was the golden hour of peace and community life. Towns had banks, churches, and soda fountains, and for many, that third one was where the real moral character got tested. It's where first crushes bloomed over butterscotch floats, where old men debated politics between sips of phosphate, where a 5-year-old could consume 12 ounces of pure carbonation and begin speaking in tongues. It was the democratic institution no one asked for, but everyone adored. The soda jerk himself was part barista, part bartender, and part babysitter. He knew your name, your favorite drink, your romantic situation, and probably your dental history. He could whip up a banana split with one hand while counseling someone through a breakup with the other. You came for the drink, but stayed for the performance. And if he winked and gave you an extra scoop of malt, that was basically a marriage proposal. And the drinks, oh, the drinks. There were no simple colas here. You had lime rickeys, egg creams, cherry phosphates, pineapple freezes, vanilla cokes, chocolate sodas, and the mysterious special house blend that tasted like ambition and root bark. The combinations were endless. Some defied logic, some defied health codes, but all of them had one thing in common. They made you feel like something was happening. The fountains also played host to the most sacred of community rituals: the post-church rush, the after-school hangout, and the let's take the baby out before it screams again outing. It was loud. It was sticky. It was glorious. Of course, not everyone loved the mayhem. Teachers dreaded Monday mornings after a weekend of children mainlining syrupy energy. Parents tried to regulate visits like mini prohibitionists. And the occasional town moralist would declare the soda fountain a den of youthful indulgence, mostly because kids were starting to flirt while drinking bubblegum phosphate. But despite the drama, soda fountains brought people together. They were the emotional glue of many small towns, a place where you could laugh, cry, drink something carbonated, and possibly invent a new dance move under the influence of citrus fizz. For a few nickels, you could belong. Eventually, soda fountains faded, casualties of the rise of fast food, vending machines, and a suspicious amount of paperwork. But their spirit lingers. Every diner milkshake, every artisanal soda shop, every awkward first date over floats. These are echoes of the golden age of bubbly social bonding. So next time you're sipping something fizzy in public and feel that sudden urge to tell a stranger your life story, just know you're honoring a tradition of slightly chaotic, wildly caffeinated, community-centered sweetness. And yes, it still counts, even if you ordered a diet. Watch as sodas make the leap from trusted remedy to family-friendly treat, now with 100% less cocaine, allegedly. It's the early 20th century. The world is changing fast. Electricity is lighting up cities. Cars are making the horses nervous. And people are beginning to ask important questions like, should my headache cure taste like dessert? The answer, it turns out, is yes, but only after some careful rebranding, a little social panic, and the growing realization that maybe, just maybe, we should stop putting opiates in lemonade. Soda didn't begin as a drink of joy. It began as medicine. Fizzy medicine, yes, but still medicine. It was doled out by pharmacists, served in glass vials, and sold with promises that would make a modern wellness influencer blush. Relief from indigestion, fatigue, melancholy, sore joints, and female complaints. Soda had it all, and for a time, nobody blinked when someone said, "My toddler won't sleep unless he's had his celery tonic." But soon, whispers started. Not everyone loved the idea of a society powered by bubbly stimulants and unpronounceable elixirs. Scientific reports, public health campaigns, and the occasional newspaper headline like, "Local woman drinks for coca, tonics," tries to outrun. Train began to chip away at soda's image as a miracle drug. Enter the sweet rebrand. In a masterclass of pivoting, soda companies traded their lab coats for boaties and started calling themselves refreshment brands. Out went the talk of nerve tonics. In came the talk of joy, energy, and that vague word everyone loves. Refreshing. No longer something your doctor whispered about behind the pharmacy. Soda was now a treat. Something you enjoyed with friends on hot days, with a wink and a smile. Ideally without the side effects. And with that shift came a massive marketing overhaul. The tone pivoted from clinical to delightful. Posters once filled with stern, bespectacled men holding test tubes were replaced by bright images of wholesome families, beach picnics, and teenagers laughing while holding glass bottles like they contained liquid happiness, which, to be fair, they sort of did, just with a lot more sugar and a lot less laudanum. This was also the birth of soda mascots and jingles. Gone were claims like "stimulates the nervous system," replaced with cheerful rhymes about sharing a cola with a friend. Cartoon mascots appeared, some cute, some mildly terrifying. Bottles got curves, slogans got friendlier, and every advertisement screamed one thing loud and clear: this is safe, this is fun, this is for everyone. Even the ingredients got a PR makeover. Cocaine? Quietly removed. Caffeine? Still there, but no longer front and center. Sugar? Embraced like an old friend. and natural flavors became the new catch-all, which could mean anything from vanilla extract to a whisper of sassafras collected under a full moon. It didn't matter. What mattered was that it was fizzy, sweet, and wouldn't raise too many questions. Soda became a lifestyle, not a treatment. No longer a desperate attempt to cure what ailed you. It was now about enhancing your mood. Having a bad day? Drink a cola? Celebrating a birthday? Bring out the floats. Feeling like society is collapsing around you? Try it with ice and a cherry on top. And remarkably, it worked. The rebrand stuck. Today, soda is still a symbol of comfort and Americana. We sip it at barbecues, ball games, and movie theaters. We give it to kids at birthday parties. We mix it with popcorn, pour it over ice cream, and sometimes even call it a guilty pleasure, as if it once had a dark past involving chloroform and unlicensed pharmacists. It did. So next time you're enjoying a bubbly, sugary, legally permissible beverage, remember, that can in your hand is the product of one of the greatest rebrands in history. It was once a miracle treatment that could double as a sleep deterrent and mood-altering substance. Now, it's just Tuesday. And honestly, that's progress. What traces of this wild era survive in your modern can of cola? Why does your energy drink taste faintly like regret and history? Because even though the drugs are gone, mostly, the vibes remain. Crack open a soda today, and you're not just getting 39 grams of sugar and a crisp little kick. You're sipping from a legacy of quackery, capitalism, and carbonated chaos. It's not just a drink, it's a historical artifact with bubbles. That fizz, that glorious hiss when you pop the can, that's not just pressure. It's the sound of 100 years of trial, error, and highly questionable pharmaceutical decisions. Your soda doesn't just wake you up, it whispers, "Once upon a time, I cured gout." Modern sodas are the refined descendants of a time when the ingredient list read like a chemistry midterm. Sure, we've cleaned things up, no more cocaine, opium, or mystery tinctures. But we've kept the essence. The soda aisle still hums with the promise of transformation. Energy, vitality, a temporary escape from your inbox. It's just now wrapped in aluminum and promising natural flavors instead of patented euphoria. And caffeine? Still very much present. It's the last legal survivor of the old feel something fast era. We've taken the cocaine out of cola, but we left just enough kick to get you through that Monday morning meeting with Steve from accounting. Energy drinks took that baton and sprinted with it, building an empire on neon cans and slogans like "Unleash the Beast" and "Awaken Your Inner Volcano," which frankly sound like side effects from 1901's celery tonic. Sugar, too, remains a loyal friend. It's no longer promoted as a health supplement, thank you, FDA, but it still anchors the experience. Modern sodas are sweet in the way a lullaby isn't. They come for your bloodstream with the grace of a marching band. Diet sodas swapped out the sugar for something that tastes vaguely like chemistry homework. But the mission remains the same. Give you a brief, bubbly moment where the world makes sense. Branding hasn't changed much either. The modern soda logo is just a cleaned-up version of the 1900's label. Still red and white. Still vaguely promising happiness. Still mysteriously attached to polar bears. The mascots got cuter, the slogans got safer, but the emotional pitch stayed identical. Drink this and feel better. Drink this and you belong. And then there's the flavor. You ever notice how some sodas still taste like something your Victorian great-aunt might have kept in a medicine cabinet? That's not an accident. Many flavors, root beer, ginger ale, sarsaparilla, are direct descendants of those early health tonics. We just stopped pretending they cured anything. Now they're just nostalgia in a can. Liquid time travel. A comforting hint of sassafras and the gentle sting of 1,000 forgotten promises. Even the soda ritual hasn't changed. You drink it when you're tired, stressed, celebrating, procrastinating, or just bored and wandering the kitchen. That's no coincidence. Soda was always meant to be emotional. Something between a hug, a slap, and a sugar-coated pep talk. It was designed to do something, even if what it mostly does now is keep you just caffeinated enough to rearrange your bookshelves at 10:30 p.m. So, the next time you open a can, listen closely. Beneath the hiss and fizz is the echo of an age when soda was wild, lawless, and probably illegal in several jurisdictions. It may not promise miracles anymore, but it's still part potion, part comfort, and part sweet reminder that history, like soda, is best taken with a little fizz, a lot of sugar, and absolutely no questions. Sweet dreams. Don't forget to brush your teeth. Eventually, the party ended. As regulations tightened and ingredients got safer and less fun, Americans were left with a collective caffeine hangover, and maybe a few stories to tell their grandkids. It was bound to happen. You can only ride a sugar and stimulant high for so long before someone calls a meeting. And by the mid-20th century, that meeting had definitely been called by the government, the medical community, and a few concerned parents who noticed that little Timmy hadn't blinked since his third phosphate. The golden age of anything goes fizzled, bit by bit. Soda stopped being a miracle cure and started being what it actually was. A refreshing, tasty beverage with enough sugar to preserve a small animal. New laws required ingredient transparency. Narcotics were out. Unregulated nerve tonics were out. Chloroform-flavored lemonade? Definitely out. By the time the 1950s rolled around, soda had been fully domesticated. It wore a bow tie, went to church, and didn't cause hallucinations on school nights. But oh, what a ride it had been. Those who lived through the early soda years remembered them fondly, and sometimes fuzzily. Back in my day, Grandpa would say, we drank soda that could knock out a mule, and we liked it. He'd sip his modern cola, sigh, and mutter something about how it used to come with a sparkle and a sense of destiny. And he wasn't wrong. There was a magic to it, a sense of promise in every bottle. You didn't just drink soda, you experienced it. It was the taste of rebellion, of optimism, of let's pretend this will fix everything. And when that illusion was taken away, when sodas were forced to stop pretending to be medicine and settle into their role as dessert with branding, something changed. America had a bit of a cultural come-down. No more healing elixirs. No more bubbly hope in a bottle. Just soft drinks. Fizzy soft drinks. People adjusted. Sort of. The soda fountains slowly gave way to vending machines. The soda jerks were replaced by teenage cashiers. Cherry phosphates were replaced by big gulps. It was still sweet, still cold, still comforting, but the edge was gone. The wild sparkle had turned into a gentle fizz. And yet, something lingered. Even after the thrill had passed, the nostalgia stayed. The branding remained cheerful. The ads still promised joy. The flavors still carried echoes of an era when drinks were dangerous, mysterious, and possibly medicinal. People still craved that feeling, even if they now called it an afternoon pick-me-up instead of a journey to the stars. In time, new forms of fizz rose to take the mantle. Energy drinks swaggered into the market, boasting caffeine levels that would make a 1900's pharmacist flinch. Wellness tonics returned in new clothes, now with activated charcoal and ginger root instead of mystery syrup and morphine. The cycle, as always, continued. just with better font choices and fewer untested narcotics. But deep down, the legacy of those early sodas lives on, not just in the branding or the flavor, but in the idea that maybe, just maybe, a simple drink could fix something. Lift you up, calm you down, make the world feel a little more magical, even if it's just for the 12 minutes it takes to drink it. So, when the soda ran out, the dream didn't die. It just got diluted. Carbonated nostalgia in a safer, milder, less legally questionable form. And now, as you drift towards sleep, remember, history is fizzy. It bubbles, it bites, and sometimes it forgets to read the label, but it's always worth a sip. Behind the marble counter, the pharmacist wasn't just measuring out cough syrup. He was a low-key chemist with access to a mind-boggling cabinet of extracts, powders, and tinctures. Each day, he played a personal game of will this cure you or just make you interesting at parties. Welcome to the golden era of bespoke drinks, when every soda was a new adventure and sometimes a mild felony. Imagine stepping up to the counter at your local drugstore, not to pick up a prescription, but to request something vaguely therapeutic that also tastes like rainbows and regret. The man behind the counter isn't just a pharmacist. He's a magician, a mixologist, and a highly caffeinated alchemist, wearing a bow tie. He adjusts his spectacles, consults his handwritten notebook of successful combinations, and begins to build your beverage using tools that would make a modern health inspector faint. In front of him is the cabinet, a tall, wooden monument to possibility and poor impulse control. Inside, dozens of glass jars filled with mysterious powders, roots, and tinctures with names like Tonica Vita, Balm, Brain Essence, Elixir No, 17, and Gentleman's Wakefulness Extract. A modern pharmacist has a drawer of antibiotics. This guy has a shelf of optimism and something that glows faintly when the lights are off. His measuring tools? A wobbly scale, a brass scoop, and what looks suspiciously like a gravy boat. He's not concerned with FDA approvals or dosage charts. He's vibing. A splash of cola nut extract for pep, a few drops of sarsaparilla to round it out. And why not? A pinch of powdered rhubarb root, because no one's dared it yet, and you look like someone who enjoys risk. You're not ordering a soda, you're commissioning one, and every customer gets a slightly different experience. Mrs. Alderson, who complains about nerves, gets a phosphate with lavender, valerian, and possibly a drop of morphine. Young Mr. Walters, studying for exams, gets a cola laced with caffeine, cola extract, and something labeled Excelsior Dust, which sounds motivational but might actually be lithium. The pharmacist smiles and insists it's perfectly safe, which is 1900's, speak for you'll feel amazing and divided by or see time collapse. These concoctions weren't written down, they were memorized, passed along, whispered over glass counters like state secrets. The soda fountain wasn't just a business. It was an experimental lab with sticky floors. One day's hit drink might be the next week's cautionary tale, and still, customers lined up, desperate for a taste of something that might fix their sciatica, brighten their mood, or make them feel like Teddy Roosevelt charging San Juan Hill. Every now and then, things got creative. Cherry almond fizz with strychnine for clarity. Beef extract seltzer for vitality. A celery caffeine chamomile cocktail known as the Sleepwalker because it helped you rest and plot your next invention. There were no limits, just glass bottles, wide eyes, and the hum of possibility. And let's not forget the secret menu. The blends only offered to trusted customers. Stuff that never appeared on the wall. The afternoon vanisher. The midnight hummer. The Dr. Pepper. But with regret. If you had a wink, and a nickel, the pharmacist would pour you something that made your headaches disappear and your thoughts smell like cinnamon. Eventually, of course, science and law teamed up and ruined the fun. Dosages were standardized. Ingredients were regulated. And the pharmacist's cabinet turned from a playground into a checklist. But for a brief, glorious window, soda mixology was like jazz. Improvisational, experimental, and slightly dangerous if done near an open flame. So next time you sip a standard issue root beer and wonder where the thrill went, picture that old school pharmacist with his spice rack of chaos and a grin that said, "I have no idea what's in this. But it's going to be interesting." And honestly, it always was. In the 1900s, any sign of stress, restlessness, or womanly worries could be met with a prescription for a fizzy elixir said to calm the nerves. Little did anyone know, these concoctions often included enough sedatives to knock out a horse. But hey, at least everyone at the sewing circle was suddenly very chill and suspiciously upbeat. Welcome to the gilded age of carbonated gender stereotypes, where every ache, emotional wobble, or moment of visible irritation in a woman was diagnosed as nervous exhaustion, and the cure? Bubbles. Well, bubbles plus some potent mood-altering substances that we'd now consider very illegal or very concerning. Doctors and pharmacists of the day had an impressive confidence in their ability to calm a lady down with syrup. If you were a woman feeling a bit overwhelmed, maybe because you'd just spent 8 straight hours hand-washing linens and managing 5 children under the age of 6, the solution was not rest, support, or acknowledgement. It was a tall glass of Ladies' Tonic No. 3, which sounded delicate but had the pharmaceutical weight of a tranquilized moose. The marketing leaned all the way in. Ads featured dainty, corseted women lounging gracefully with a soda in hand. Their worries apparently dissolved by one sip. Soothes female nerves. Restores gentle moods. A tonic for the fairer sex. In reality, these beverages often contained a unique cocktail of alcohol, chloral hydrate, bromides, and herbal sedatives like valerian or poppy extract. A single glass could knock the anxiety out of you and 3 generations of your family. Of course, no one was being malicious. The idea at the time was that women simply had more sensitive nervous systems. Also, smaller pockets, fewer rights, and absolutely zero input on the composition of their beverages. A restorative soda was a socially acceptable way to quietly medicate a person for experiencing the normal stress of existence. These drinks were often recommended for conditions like hysteria, which roughly translated to feeling emotions in public. Vapors, possibly farts, possibly just being dramatic. And neurasthenia, a blanket term for everything from fatigue to existential dread. You might be thinking, isn't that just life? Yes. But in 1900, if you experienced it and had a uterus, they gave you a bottle of carbonated narcotics and told you to lie down in a dark room. Soda fountains became a quiet sanctuary for women to self-soothe under the guise of enjoying a treat. Behind every cherry phosphate or strawberry seltzer was the unspoken promise that the chaos of daily life could be softened, if not solved, by something frothy and pharmacologically aggressive. Housewives met there not only to chat, but to decompress chemically. It wasn't just a drink. It was an emotional reset button served over crushed ice. And lest we think the soda jerks were innocent, think again. These men, essentially baristas with medical-grade ingredients, knew exactly what they were serving. A woman would walk in tight-lipped and pale, and within minutes of sipping her nerve tonic, she'd be giggling at a pun and flirting with the idea of baking 7 pies in a single afternoon. That's not soda. That's alchemy. Over time, As medical science improved and society slowly realized that maybe women didn't need to be chemically muted for being alive, these concoctions faded out. Regulations tightened, labels became required, and those once soothing sodas were quietly retired or rebranded as simple soft drinks, now only mildly capable of mood adjustment via sugar crash. But the legacy lives on. Even today, the idea that a fizzy drink can fix a bad day lingers. We reach for a soda not just for flavor, but for comfort. A brief, bubbly escape from chaos, minus the horse tranquilizers. So if your grandmother ever smiled mysteriously while sipping her ginger ale and said, "They don't make 'em like they used to," she was probably right, and maybe a little sedated. Picture a man with a mustache sharp enough to slice bread, hauling a suitcase filled with glass bottles promising everything from instant energy to hair regrowth. These roving salesmen crisscrossed the country, convincing your great-grandparents to chug a carbonated science experiment in exchange for a shiny nickel and a lifetime of mild regrets. This was the golden age of the door-to-door tonic tycoon, a time when all you needed to start a beverage empire was confidence, a hat, and the ability to pronounce sarsaparilla without blinking. These men, always men, traveled by wagon, rail, or on very determined horses, stopping in towns where science was still considered suspicious and optimism came bottled in amber glass. And oh, the bottles. They came in every shape and color, sealed with cork, wax, or vague promises. The labels? Works of art. Imagine swirling script, bold declarations like restores vital force, or brings the dead back to mild vibrancy. If the bottle didn't catch your attention, the salesman would, usually with a booming voice, a small folding stage, and a dramatic story involving a mysterious illness, a miraculous recovery, and an old recipe from a mystic he definitely didn't make up in Ohio. Inside the suitcase, a chaotic chemistry set, elixirs, syrups, tonics, nerve restorers, breath fresheners, and beverages that were technically both digestives and paint thinner. Each one claimed to do something miraculous. One drink promised to invigorate the mind and gallbladder. Another claimed it could soothe hysteria and strengthen the knees. You didn't ask questions. You just drank it and hoped for the best. The salesman himself was half magician, half preacher, all caffeine. He was there to perform, to convince, to lightly hypnotize your entire town into believing that drinking Dr. Throttleton's effervescent brain sauce would make you smarter, stronger, handsomer, and less prone to barn accidents. And somehow it worked. He'd show up in the town square, set up a wooden crate, and begin the day's sermon on the gospel of fizz. He'd demonstrate by drinking 2 bottles, lifting a wheelbarrow, and dancing a jittery jig. Children were wide-eyed, women were intrigued, men, competitive and slightly anxious, bought 3 just to be safe. Of course, not everything went smoothly. Sometimes the tonic worked a little too well, like the one that caused a group of farmers in Iowa to plow their neighbor's field entirely by mistake, or the one that turned out to be 70% corn liquor and left an entire quilting club convinced they had invented jazz. But by the time the side effects kicked in, the salesman was already 2 counties away, charming a new crowd with his magical, mildly unstable brews. These weren't just salesmen. They were soda evangelists, bringing effervescence to the frontier with wide grins and questionable ethics. Eventually, of course, the FDA and a growing sense of self-preservation brought an end to the Traveling Elixir Act. Regulations required ingredients to be labeled, claims to be proven, and beverages to not cause unexpected third eyes. The era of the tonic-toting wanderer faded into folklore, but their legacy? Still very much alive. Today's energy drinks, wellness shots, and miracle teas are just the modern, less mustachioed versions of those old-school bottles. Same promises, slightly better packaging, fewer reports of spontaneous barn dancing. So next time you sip something that swears it'll fuel your brain or restore inner balance, take a moment, picture the mustache, picture the suitcase, picture your great-grandfather standing barefoot in the dust, holding a bottle that smelled like peppermint and raw ambition. And then, just for fun, believe in the magic, even if it's just for a minute. Because sometimes, history's greatest stories are carbonated. When your medicine cabinet contained more alcohol, opium, and cocaine than a modern nightclub, it was only natural for some of these ingredients to wander into your soft drinks. The line between cough remedy and after-dinner treat got thinner than a peppermint stick. And sometimes, so did your attention span. Let's set the scene. It's the late 1800s. You've got a scratchy throat and a mild case of existential dread. You head to your local pharmacist, not for comfort or a checkup, but for a bottle of something dark, syrupy, and vaguely alarming. He hands you a cough syrup labeled soothing and non-drowsy, even though it contains 3 different narcotics and enough alcohol to toast a wedding. You take a sip. 15 minutes later, you no longer remember you had a cold, or a mortgage, or a name. This was the golden age of medicinal cocktails, where the term medicine applied to anything that made you feel different, especially if that feeling included euphoria, drowsiness, or an urge to climb a tree and recite poetry. And cough syrups? They were the crown jewel. If it came in a bottle and tasted like licorice soaked in molasses, it was good for your lungs. But eventually, someone had a brilliant idea. What if, they wondered, we took these feel-good ingredients and made them bubbly, and thus the slippery slope? 1 minute you're sucking on a menthol lozenge infused with chloroform, a real thing. The next you're at a soda fountain ordering a lung elixir fizz that tastes like carbonated eucalyptus and mild delusion. These crossover creations became wildly popular. Part refreshment, part remedy, and all unregulated. It didn't stop with cough syrup. Cold tonics and flu treatments also jumped the fence. Camphor, mint, opium-laced honey? Toss them in a bottle, add carbonation, and congratulations, you've invented winter spice cola. It was medicine-flavored madness with just enough sugar to convince your taste buds that everything was fine, and people loved it. Drinks that were once reserved for the bedridden became everyday indulgences. Why wait until you were sick to enjoy your cherry bark tonic when you could have it daily over ice with a wedge of lemon? The leap from therapeutic to Tuesday treat happened quickly and quietly. The marketing didn't help. Ads made no distinction between beverages for health and beverages for happiness. A single label might claim to relieve congestion, calm nerves, and pair well with roast duck. Children's versions were sweetened, diluted, and still, somehow, contained enough cough syrup to make nap time very effective. The boundary between candy, medicine, and soft drinks blurred to the point of invisibility. Licorice root, both a snack and a remedy. Peppermint oil, good for stomach aches and oddly common in soda. Even horehound, a plant that sounds like a Victorian insult, became a popular flavor in both lozenges and fizzy drinks. Taste buds were confused. So were regulators. Eventually, the law caught up. Gradually, medicinal ingredients were filtered out of soda formulas. But not because people stopped enjoying them. Because people started asking what they actually were. Turns out, it's hard to justify giving a 6-year-old a daily dose of carbonated morphine just because it supports respiratory health. Today, modern soda is tamer. The connection to cold remedies remains mostly in spirit, though if you squint, that menthol-forward energy drink still feels a little like flu season in a can. And let's be honest, when you're under the weather, Nothing hits quite like a ginger ale with the emotional memory of 19th century snake oil. So next time you pop open a soda and feel oddly soothed, you're not imagining it. You're sipping on a distant cousin of that wild medicinal past. A time when cough syrup was dinner, and nobody batted an eye if your soda could also double as anesthesia. Sleep tight, and maybe keep the NyQuil in a separate cupboard. So as the fizz settles and the last bubbles drift away, let's take a moment to appreciate just how wild things used to be. Tonight, you survived the glory days of soda. A time when a refreshing beverage might leave you wide awake, strangely euphoric, or briefly believing you could run a marathon and then invent the marathon. You dodged a hangover with a shot of celery cola, saw your neighborhood pharmacist double as a part-time wizard, and maybe, just maybe, realized that the line between medicine and mayhem was always just one secret ingredient away. There's a certain resilience to the people of that era, equal parts hope, trust, and a deep desire to believe that a cold drink could fix whatever ailed you. They lived through headaches, heartbreaks, and the pure, caffeinated chaos of the early soda fountains, all while helping invent an industry that still keeps us buzzing today. And sure, sometimes their remedies were a little extra, by which I mean packed with enough stimulants to keep a small town awake till Tuesday. But their optimism was real. So tonight, as you rest in a world where your cola won't accidentally contain a pharmacist's personal stash, maybe give a silent thank you to those brave souls of the 1900s. They endured the uncertainty, the sugar highs, and the come-downs so you wouldn't have to. They taught us that comfort sometimes comes with consequences, and that sometimes the best stories are the ones with a few wild ingredients. Because history isn't just about suffering or struggle, it's proof that people will always find a way to cope, connect, and laugh about it all later. So close your eyes, breathe deep, and be grateful that your midnight soda is mostly just sugar and bubbles now. May your dreams be sweet, your sleep be deep, and your beverage choices always be slightly less exciting than they used to be. Good night.